Hi, I am Colin Seaborn, Chief Metallurgist for the US-based company Ocean Minerals. However, I am based near Sydney in Australia. Welcome to this online presentation covering OML's recent sampling and processing initiatives related to the cobalt-rich manganese nodules in the Cook Islands. This presentation will cover Ocean Minerals' extensive expertise related to manganese nodules harvesting and processing, a brief history of nodules collection and metallurgical processing relevant to the current project. More details on this can be found in the ALTA 2020 conference paper. It will also cover a summary of the significant resources in OML's reserved areas of the Cook Islands, the very successful OML research cruise and how samples were collected in December 2019. It will outline research cruise, sample processing and assays, past metallurgical test work on nodules by Beijing General Research Institute for Mining and Metallurgy, known as BGRIM, and the excellent results from BGRIM's laboratory leaching and metal recovery tests on OML's nodule samples. And then finally, it will outline briefly OML's proposed future work. Before I discuss the latest results, I want to tell you a little bit more about Ocean Minerals. OML is led by established industry professionals with specialised skill sets across design and engineering, marine geology, metallurgy, as well as operational and financial management. It is supported by a very experienced advisory board as well. Further details of experience and expertise can be found at OML's website. We believe that this combination of historical experience and current expertise provides confidence that Ocean Minerals can be successful in this exciting nodules project. Now let's have a little bit of history. The Ocean Minerals story had its beginnings around 50 years ago. 4 major mining company consortia were set up in the 1970s to develop systems for collecting seabed nodules from 5 kilometres underwater in the Pacific Ocean. One of these consortium was led by Kennecott, now part of Rio Tinto. John Halkard, current chairman of Ocean Minerals, was an engineer in the Kennecott consortium from the 1970s. With the CCZ nodules collected by Kennecott, a pilot plant was set up to test a low temperature and atmospheric pressure process called Kuprion. It was developed under the leadership of Dr. J. Agarwal. He was an advisor to Ocean Minerals and until he passed away earlier in 2020. CCZ nodules usually have an excess of 1% each of copper and nickel, but around 0.2% cobalt. Given the perceived future need for nickel and copper and the low value of cobalt in the 1970s, the focus was on maximising the extraction of copper and nickel. This was successfully achieved in the Kuprion process. However, as the nodules were in international waters, the United Nations became involved and set up conditions that made it unattractive for the consortia to continue work in the 1980s. In recent years, the UN began to set up a system whereby countries, including island nations, could partner with private consortia to carry out environmental and early prospecting work in the CCZ. It has been foreshadowed that this system, including a mining code, may be further clarified in 2021. In case some of you are not aware, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background on the Cook Islands. The Cook Islands is located in the Pacific Ocean, as indicated on the map. It consists of a series of small islands with a population of around 17,500 on the islands. The island population has been relatively stable since 1980. The population based on the islands has generally been within 10% of 17,500 since that time. However, over 100,000 Cook Islanders live in New Zealand and Australia. The main industries on the islands are based on tourism and local fishing. This narrow industry base led to the Cook Islands government pursuing potential development opportunities from the harvesting seabed nodules. Expansion of the Cook Islands industry base was seen as a way of enhancing the long-term prospects of the current population, as well as those potentially returning from overseas. The current COVID-19 pandemic has emphasised the risks to the Cook Islands of relying significantly on tourism to support its economy. Government representatives have talked about creating a sovereign wealth fund when royalties and taxes are received, similar to North Sea oil. Ocean Minerals recognised the mineral potential of the Cook Islands sediments and manganese nodules some years ago. It paid to reserve rights over 3 sediment blocks as well as 2 manganese nodule blocks. These rights have been maintained. For the 2 nodules blocks, RSC Mining and Minerals Exploration Consultants produced an NI 43-101 resource report. This was based on data from various international cruises from 1978 to 2000. This RSC report confirmed how the CI nodules had a different mix of cobalt, nickel and copper, as well as iron and manganese when compared to CCZ nodules, as you can see from the table on the slide. As only limited volumes of samples had previously been collected from the Cook Islands, exclusive economic zone, it was necessary for Ocean Minerals to carry out a research cruise to obtain more samples. This cruise would assess the RSC report conclusions, collect sufficient nodules to enable initial metallurgical tests, and continue environmental work. The Ocean Minerals cruise in December 2019 was focused on collecting sufficient nodule samples to be able to carry out initial metallurgical tests in the laboratory. It was not intended to upgrade the resource category from inferred. While there was initial targeted nodule collection areas in Block 4, these had to be adjusted based on weather due to the small vessel being used. Nevertheless, there was sufficient diversity in sites to identify if there is major variability in nodule characteristics and assays. Overall, 252 kilograms of wet nodules were collected from 50 different sites. This would be sufficient for the initial laboratory tests. The nodule collection system was by a free-fall grab process. This is explained on the next slide. This slide shows the operation of the free-fall grab system. The free-fall grab contains weights on the side of the grab with floats attached above. The grab and floats are lowered into the water. Once released from the crane, they are no longer attached to the vessel. The rates on the grab are sufficient to cause the grab to descend to the ocean floor. When the grab reaches the ocean floor, the grab closes up, collecting the nodules and dropping off the weights. The grab then rises because of the buoyancy from the floats. When the grab system reaches the surface, it is captured by the vessel and brought on board. The grab is then emptied of its nodules. This system was very successful in that nodules were recovered at all 50 drop sites. This slide shows a photo of the free-fall grab approaching the seabed to collect the nodules. This photo was taken by a camera located above the grab. The steel weights can be seen on either side of the grab. Also, it shows the high density of nodules on the seabed. Photos from the cruise and videos of the collection process can be accessed on the Ocean Minerals website as indicated on the slide. This slide shows the assays for cobalt, nickel and copper of individual nodules collected across the 50 drop sites. An average of 4 individual nodules of different sizes were assayed for each drop site. Even though the drop sites covered a distance of over 20 nautical miles, there was remarkable consistency in the results. As can be seen from the graph, cobalt assays increased slightly with increasing nodule dry weight. On the other hand, both nickel and copper assays decreased slightly with increasing nodule dry weight. One of the OML's geologists suggested that this difference in assays with nodule weight may have been due to nickel and copper grades being influenced by the underlying sediment, while the cobalt assays could be influenced by the ocean waters. So the larger nodules would have higher cobalt but lower nickel and copper. The assay results of these nodules were consistent with RSC's previous resource estimate. Therefore, the nodule sample collected by the research crews was considered to be sufficiently representative for initial metallurgical testing. In carrying out a literature review of metallurgical tests on nodules, we identified a number of potential process routes that had been evaluated since the 1970s. These included pyrometallurgical and hydrometallurgical approaches. As indicated earlier, Kennicott under J. Agarwal had developed an ambient pressure and low temperature ammonium carbonate leaching process called Cuprion. A low temperature and pressure process would have capital and operating cost benefits compared to most alternative routes. Through a paper given at the 2016 ALTA conference, we became aware of the metallurgical work that BGRIM, the Beijing Metallurgical Research Lab, had been doing on nodules. This work indicated that an ammonium sulfate version of the Cuprion process would give better leaching results when cobalt was the primary processing target. This appeared to be due to cobalt sulfate solubility being much higher than that of cobalt carbonate in the leachate. In April 2019, Ocean Minerals personnel visited the BGRIM facilities and met key metallurgists, including Dr. Feng Lin Yong, who presented the ALTA paper in 2016. In January 2020, OML signed an agreement with BGRIM to carry out laboratory tests on the Cook Islands nodules that were recovered from the research crews. The initial results of this test work follow. A bulk sample of nodules recovered from the Cook Islands nodules collected in December 2019 was sent to BGRIM. OML and BGRIM personnel then worked together to develop and review the testing program. The first tests were aimed at verifying whether the ammonium sulfate process was also better for cobalt extraction on the Cook Island nodules. This was found to be the case. As you can see from the slide, various leaching parameters were then tested. The best laboratory test resulted in 93% cobalt being leached. This was at 30 degrees centigrade and at atmospheric pressure. While the extractions of nickel and copper were somewhat less, this reflects the lower feed grades and possibly those extractions being better at slightly higher temperatures. However, the main value is in cobalt extraction. A limited amount of testing has been done on manganese, and the initial leaching tests indicated about 60% was cellularized. The laboratory test outline, including metal recoveries, is shown in the flowsheet. The laboratory batch processing flowsheet has some differences compared to the proposed continuous pilot plant and industrial processes. In the industrial process, some of the supernatant from the solid liquid separation would be recycled to the ammonia leaching stage. This would be done to maintain a steady state process with low solid state density and high metal concentrations in the leaching vessel. See the green box in the top right hand side of the flow sheet. Because filtering had to be used in the laboratory, the oxidation effects during this process preclude the supernatant from being recycled in the laboratory. After filtering in the laboratory, the leachate was oxidized and manganese dioxide was precipitated. This would be recycled to the leaching stage in an industrial process. See the green box in the top left-hand side of the flow sheet. The recycled manganese dioxide would be converted to manganese carbonate in the leaching vessel. This manganese carbonate would then become part of the solid residue. The manganese carbonate is recovered by flotation from the residue. See the right-hand side of the flow sheet. Now look at the centre part of the flow sheet. Following removal of the manganese from the leachate, nickel and copper are recovered by solvent extraction processes. In this test work, copper and nickel metals were then recovered by electrowinning from the solvent extraction solution. However, after solvent extraction, instead of producing metals, other processes may be followed to produce copper and nickel salts, depending on end markets such as electric vehicles. Cobalt is recovered following ammonia evaporation as shown on the flow sheet. Excellent product grades and overall metal recoveries were achieved with this process. Before Ocean Minerals had recovered and processed nodules from the Cook Islands, an indicative preliminary economic assessment was produced by AMC Mining Consultants in 2019 based on historical data. AMC used the resource data produced by RSC. AMC also reviews historical mining and processing information. This data did not result from work done on Cook Island nodules, but on other nodule deposits, particularly those in the Pacific's Clarion-Clipperton zone. Following the recovery of the nodules in the research cruise, better data has now been achieved. This includes high recoveries of cobalt and extraction of manganese. This will assist in the updating of the PEA. Some samples have also been sent to other organisations for testing of their processes. No significant data is currently available from these tests. The next set of cruises will aim to support the enhancement of environmental, resource and processing data. An indicative timeline of next steps is shown on the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. To find out more information on Ocean Minerals and this project, please note the contact details on this slide. Thank you.